It doesn't. Okay. Okay, everyone. Thank you for coming here today. I'm Erin Zamos, State Chapter Leader of Moms Demand Action in Minnesota. Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense is part of Every Town for Gun Safety. We have chapters in all 50 states and more than 5 million supporters. We are here today with our lawmakers and partners, Students Demand Action to Protect Minnesota, to urge the passage of common sense gun reform this session. Yeah. And now I would like to introduce, we are grateful to have the new Speaker of the House, Representative Melissa Portman here, and we appreciate her leadership on this critical issue.
But I want to thank you for really getting engaged and getting involved. You know, for too long in this country, we would have a tragedy like Sandy Hook, and it would grab public attention for a while, and then it would fade. And Parkland was different. Those kids would not let us forget what happened, and they would not let us move on as though nothing had happened. And you got engaged, you were probably engaged before that, but you elected this majority. Woo! Yeah. And you put us in a position to move legislation forward and to get legislation past the floor of the Minnesota House of Representatives. We intend in our top 10 files to introduce 2 common sense gun violence prevention measures, and we intend to see those through across the finish line in the House. And we will count on you to continue to hold us accountable on this very important issue, to assure that we never forget how important this is, and we don't let it recede into the background of other issues at the Capitol. And we will rely on your help to get it through the Senate and to get it signed by Governor Walz. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker-elect Portman. I really appreciate your leadership. And now I would like to introduce a true leader of common sense gun reform, Representative Dave Pinto.
I'm Representative Dave Pinto. I represent the southwestern neighborhoods of St. Paul. Outside the legislature, I serve as a prosecutor for Ramsey County, and so I see the impact of gun violence every day in our community. So last spring, I was the author of the bills for criminal background checks and for red flag laws, and those continue to be priorities for our caucus because they continue to be priorities for Minnesotans. We need to do more to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, such as the violent felons that I'm working with and interacting with in my role as a prosecutor. We need to be taking those steps. The great majority of Minnesotans are supporting taking those steps. The great majority of Democrats, of Republicans, of gun owners, of NRA members support taking steps to do more to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. We are determined to follow through. We have, as you've heard, the Speaker designate support, with the support of our colleagues, and we certainly have the support of the people of Minnesota, and I know we have your support as well. So thank you so much for your work, and we're going to push this through.
Thank you, Representative Pinto. It is time to take action against gun violence. And gun violence affects some more than others. We need to hear their stories, support them, and honor them. It is my honor to introduce my friend and survivor fellow, Bob Milkos.
Thank you. I don't think it should be lost today that today being January 8th is the 8th anniversary of the Tucson shooting when Kathy Giffords was severely wounded. On July 19th, 1986, my sister Diane was murdered, shot and murdered, as she exited her car in Chicago. Since then, thousands of Americans have lost their lives to gun violence. Last year saw a record number of gun-related deaths. These numbers will only continue to climb unless measures are put in place to stem the flow. We know that criminal background checks and extreme risk protection orders, otherwise known as red flag laws, do, and will work. We need to muster the political will to effectively neutralize the gun manufacturer's lobby's influence on our politicians. As a former pilot, I know that the one thing that brings the most shame upon responsible pilots is abuse of alcohol by other pilots. And we have processes in place to take care of that. As a gun owner, I also know that the thing that brings the most shame on responsible gun owners is abuse of a weapon by other people. The gun lobby has no process in place to handle this. In fact, their answer always seems to be more guns, which results in more and more people dying due to gun-related deaths, and the gun manufacturing lobby getting more and more profits. Excuse me. There is no good reason why we cannot put a process in place to stem this, and that process starts with criminal background checks on all gun sales. Now, the one thing that brings the most amount of shame to a legislative body is to do nothing in the face of the public health crisis of gun violence. Even with polling numbers showing 90% of Minnesotans supporting criminal background checks on all gun sales, last year's Minnesota legislature bowed to the pressure of the gun manufacturing lobby, and it failed to pass the background check law. However, there is a process in place to remedy this issue, and that is called an election. This year's State House is now filled with many new legislators who ran on common sense gun reform. And I urge all of them now to push forward with urgency to require criminal background checks on all gun sales and to establish a red flag law. These two bills will help stem gun violence. All legislators in the Senate or the House that continue to defy the wishes of the majority will find themselves running against a common sense gun candidate in the next election. I promise you that. As a gun owner and as a veteran, I will no longer accept our children and loved ones being the price we pay for a perverted interpretation of the Second Amendment. As this past election has demonstrated, if our legislators will not protect us, then they can expect us in 2020.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce Senator Matt Klein, who as a doctor at Hennepin County Medical Center has witnessed the cost of gun violence.
Thank you all so much for coming today. So my name is Matt Klein, and 2 years ago I was elected to the state senate from Mendota Heights, but for 25 years before that I have practiced as an internal medicine physician, most recently at Hennepin Healthcare, where in downtown Minneapolis we see a daily march of broken and bleeding humanity that comes to our doors after an exchange with a gun. Recently, the National Rifle Association instructed doctors like me to stay in our lane. The implication was that the only people qualified to comment on gun violence are their members. Nearly 40,000 people in America died of gun violence last year, the highest number ever measured. This volume of mortality is comparable to deaths from sepsis or from influenza. Consider the tremendous infrastructure in research and therapy that is directed towards those illnesses, the enormous interventions around vaccination and hand washing touching every part of American life. Compare that to the puny efforts we direct toward gun violence, either in research or in intervention. Physicians have a responsibility to examine this phenomenon, to analyze solutions, to develop research, and yes, to advocate for legislation like these two bills when it is likely to be effective. To shirk this responsibility is a disservice to Minnesotans and to our profession. This is our lane. our lane, and in fact, I can name several groups that have more right to claim a place in this lane than members of the National Rifle Association. I would name family members of those who have died from gun violence.
Yes.
I would name children in our schools who experience live shooter drills.
Yes.
I would name the teachers who conduct those drills and the police officers who respond to gun violence and risk injury from guns every day.
Yes.
I would certainly name the students of Parkland High School in Florida who about this time last year witnessed their classmates being gunned to death.
Yes.
We are firmly in our lane, and we will move forward this session to answer the call of Minnesotans to change the laws of our state to protect all people from gun violence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for your leadership. Now I'd like to introduce Maya Springer-Otto, the lead of Students Demand Action Minnesota.
All right.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Maya Springer-Otto. I'm a junior in high school and the state leader for Students Demand Action Minnesota. I would like to begin by saying thank you to everyone who has helped bring attention to student voices, especially Moms Demand Action and Aaron Zama. We at Students Demand Action are beyond grateful for everything you do, including your conscious effort to include the voice of youth. Students Demand Action is a student-led organization that works to pass sensible gun laws and educate others about the issue of gun violence. We are a sister organization to Moms Demand Action, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and the Everytown Survivor Network, all under the umbrella of Everytown for gun safety. Born after the Parkland shooting, we welcome all people of high school and college age to join us in the advocacy for red flag gun laws and background checks on all gun sales.
Yes.
Gun violence is prevalent. Firearms are the second leading cause of death for American children and teens. The first leading cause of death for Black youth. Not to mention, 100 Americans are shot and killed every day, and many more are injured. We experience drill after drill, while questioning the lack of action by policymakers. Shouldn't something be done?
Yes.
Background checks on all gun sales within Minnesota will prevent those already deemed unsafe from legally purchasing a gun. With 90% support by Minnesotans and proven examples of reducing gun violence, background checks on all gun sales are common sense.
Yes.
Flag laws create a way to act before warning signs become tragedies. 13 states have enacted red flag laws, and many more are considering it, just as Minnesota should be. When a person is in crisis, it is common sense to remove the gun from the picture.
Yes.
We are marching, and those of us over 18 are voting.
That's right.
We are speaking up and showing up. We are demanding stronger gun laws. We are asking for our voices to be heard. The lives of Minnesotans, of Americans, matter. Make policy reflect that. If you would like to join the movement, please text STUDENT to 64433. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Students Demand Action Minnesota. The daily toll of gun violence requires more than thoughts and prayers. It requires action from all of us, but especially from our elected leaders. We are grateful that Minnesota legislators and the governor are making this a priority in 2019. We need to pass criminal background checks on all gun sales.
Yes.
There are loopholes in Minnesota's background check system that allow people with dangerous histories to get their hands on guns. And we can't allow this to continue. Current law doesn't require unlicensed sellers to run a background check. And criminals can exploit this loophole by purchasing guns through online dealers or through private sales. Minnesotans agree that we need to close this dangerous loophole. Indeed, 90% of Minnesota voters support background checks on all gun sales. If you talk to people across the political spectrum, from DFLers, Republicans, gun owners, NRA members, they all will say to you, we just have to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. Well, how do you do that if some sales have no background check whatsoever? How? It's just common sense. And it's time that we pass this law to keep our children and our communities safe. We also need a red flag law creating an extreme risk protective order. Red flag laws can save lives by providing a way for family members and law enforcement to intervene before warning signs turn into a tragedy. Red flag laws provide this mechanism because law enforcement and family members are often the first people to witness someone who's in crisis and know that the person could pose a threat. And so a red flag law gives them a way to go to a court to seek an order to temporarily take guns out of the way of a dangerous situation. Red flag laws can be particularly helpful for Minnesota families who are concerned that a loved one may harm themselves. Suicides account for 78% of all firearm deaths in Minnesota. Wow. And as the Minnesota Department of Health recently reported, suicides are on the rise in our state. Reducing access to firearms of a suicidal person can help save their life. We've been talking about these common sense gun reforms for a long time now. It is time to act. It is time to act on background checks. It is time to act on red flag laws. It is time to act on these common sense measures that will keep our kids and communities safe. We look forward to working with the governor and our legislators to pass these bills. And we promise that Moms Demand Action Minnesota will be there to urge you on, back you up, and continue to be a force at the Capitol until gun safety legislation is passed. Thank you all for coming here. And thank you for working with me.